Have you ever heard someone say that you need perfect grammar to speak good English? Or you can't become fluent unless you live in an English-speaking country? Well, today we're going to be putting those statements to the test. So I'm Hayley, and I'm an English teacher. I've been teaching English for about 13 years now. And today I'm going to be reacting to some agree-disagree statements about learning English as a foreign language. So I'm going to be talking about stuff like whether grammar is actually that important, does pronunciation matter, can apps and YouTube actually help you learn English, and some kind of popular advice that's going around in the learning English environment. Some of it could make matters worse, some of it could really help you. And as you watch as well, I want you to play along with me and tell me if you agree or disagree with me. And if you are learning English, if you're teaching English, or if you're preparing for Cambridge C1 and C2 exams, this video should give you a more kind of honest picture of what helps people to actually improve their English rather than just waste your time, really. But before we get into it, please do make sure that you are subscribed to the channel. And if you enjoy this video, please do give it a like as well. It just helps it to get to more people so that they can get some advice for learning English too. All right, let's get into it then. All right, so let's take a look at our statements then. So these statements, I actually do this in my conversation lessons. I do it in a lot of my lessons, actually, just for speaking practice. I often give students kind of controversial statements that they have to agree or disagree with. And it's a really good way to get people talking. If you would like to join any of my lessons, click up there. I'll put the link there and you can take a look at my group classes and individual classes as well. But today, it's not really a discussion, it's just going to be me talking, but I feel like this is going to end up quite a long episode because I can chat about quite a lot of these things in quite a bit of detail. But let's take a look at our first statement. So, you do not need to live in an English-speaking country to become fluent. I 100% agree with this. You absolutely do not need to live in an English-speaking country. Yeah, sure, it would make it a lot easier because you would have, all the exposure and you would probably pick up all of this, the slang from around you and the colloquialisms, etc., etc. But you definitely don't. I feel like the vast majority of non-native speakers of English in the world who are fluent in English don't live in an English-speaking environment. I mean, most of my students, C2 level students who I teach, they've never lived in an English-speaking environment and they're fluent. I take my husband as an example as well. He's not an native English speaker. He speaks better English than I do. And he's never lived in an English-speaking country. Sure, he's used English every day for work, but not in an English-speaking country. So, no, you do not need to live in an English-speaking environment. You don't need to move your life to a completely different country. You just need to make it a part of your everyday life. Either by watching TV, listening to podcasts, whatever you read can be in English. Obviously, all that's great for passive use, but you need to use English in your everyday life as well in order to become fluent in it. Very difficult if you don't have a job in English. If your job is in your native language, then you need to find time outside of work where you can use English, on a daily basis, basically. That's the main important thing, is that you actually use it. Because if you don't use it, then you won't become fluent, basically. All right. Okay, next one. English learners should stop trying to sound like native speakers. Ooh, it's a bit controversial, this one, I feel like. There's a lot of stuff going around on YouTube and Instagram, and people get a little bit offended by saying native speakers. What is a native speaker of English, for example? Yes, okay, someone who's grown up in an English-speaking environment and has spoken English, since they were very young. I think that's what I would say as a native speaker of English, regardless of if English is their first language or not. But should learners stop trying to sound like native speakers? I would say yes. I would say I agree that learners should stop trying to sound like native speakers, which sounds bad. I'm an English teacher. To be fair, I don't teach pronunciation. But I do get a lot of students saying, oh, my accent's horrible. I hate my accent. I hate my accent. And I think, why? Because you're perfectly intelligible. As long as the person you're speaking to can understand you, then it's not a problem. Because language is a communication tool. So if you're speaking in a way where people can't understand you or you can't communicate, then yes, you need to do something with the way you're speaking to tweak it somehow so that people can understand you. Do you need to sound like a British person or like an American or like an Australian? No, it's not necessary for you to do that. If you would feel more comfortable doing that, sure, go for it. It might take you a lifetime to get there. And you probably, linking back to the last question, you probably will need to move abroad because it's very difficult to acquire an accent when you're not in the area. But yeah, I think my question is why? Why do you want to sound not like yourself? I think there's quite a charm to accents depending on where you come from. And also, to sound like a native speaker, it's like you'd have to pick one accent. There's a lot of very, not very sexy accents in British English. There's some very, not unintelligible, but just they don't sound great to the ear, So you need to pick one anyway. And there's thousands to choose from. And then you would have to hammer that for ages and ages. And it feels like a massive waste of time to me. I don't know, what do you think? Let me know in the comments what you think about your accent or why you would want to change your accent. I think there's a lot of charm. I can tell an Italian person straight off from their accent. And that's great, because then we have something to talk about. Yeah, I don't see the problem with a foreign accent. I think maybe the only advantage would be that you could blend in better slightly and people might be more accepting of you, maybe, in some way. Not me personally, but maybe people who don't speak to foreigners or anyone outside their kind of bubble, they might be more accepting of if they sound like them. It's like a kind of tribal way of thinking about it, I guess, but maybe that would be the only advantage I can see. If there's any other advantages, let me know in the comments. We're going to move on to the next one. Most English learners spend far too much time studying and not enough time using the language. 100% agree. This is what happens when students come to me. They say, oh, I've studied this book and I've got this textbook and I've got that. And I think, forget the textbook. It doesn't matter. You need to speak. You need to use the language. You need to listen to stuff. You need to actively try to produce all of the, the vocabulary and the grammar that you know in a kind of natural way. Yes, textbooks help when you first start learning, to get that good foundation, solid foundation. They're good. So I've got cat hair on my face. I went away for a vacation and my cat has been clinging to me since then, and now my face is covered in cat hair. Yes, textbooks are good when you first start learning. Great. They give you a really nice solid foundation. But then, you should slowly start studying a lot at first, and then when you get a lot of passive knowledge, then you need to kind of transition into a more active way of using it. Spend more time, get intercambios, exchanges, language exchanges, talk to people. Again, listen to podcasts, watch TV. Transition away from the textbook and into real use, and then you will see your progress. It was like me when I studied Italian at university. Studied Italian for 2 years, pretty intensively, and then our third year was spent abroad, in Italy, and I realised I could not speak Italian at all, and I had no idea what was happening. I couldn't understand anyone, and I was away for a year, and I came back, and my level was really high, and I didn't pick up a textbook the whole time I was in Italy. I just spoke to people, and my level was up here. When I left, it was down here. So yes, absolutely, you need a real way to communicate if you can find that. Okay. All right, next one. Vocabulary is far more important than grammar for communication. I would agree. Definitely. Again, if I take myself as an example when I'm speaking Spanish, now I haven't actually studied Spanish for about 6 years. I live in Spain, so I just pick up stuff. But obviously I had all the basic grammar and vocabulary, but it's really frustrating. You know, as long as you've got basic grammar, you're fine. You can make a sentence. But if your sentence is missing, like the one really important word, if you haven't got that really important word you need to express yourself, the other person isn't going to understand what you're saying. And sometimes that still happens to me when I speak Spanish. I go, blah, 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 and then I get stuck and I think, oh my God, what's the word? And the word just doesn't come. And it's like, I haven't even got a synonym for the word. I'm trying to paraphrase myself. And it's just like, I can't get my point across the way I want to. So I would say, yes, vocabulary is far more important than grammar. Definitely focus on if you've got a good basis for grammar, focus more on vocab. There's way more vocabulary than there is grammar to learn anyway in a language, because vocabulary keeps evolving. Grammar more or less stays the same. It evolves a lot slower than vocabulary does. And obviously vocabulary is regional. You can have different regional differences. Grammar, yeah, again, maybe a tiny bit, but not so much. So yeah, 100% agree. Speaking of vocabulary and grammar, I've done something new. I've got a new project specifically for Cambridge C1 candidates. Would also be useful if you're not learning the Cambridge C1 exam. But it's a grammar and vocabulary platform. And you know, I was talking about actively practicing, not just passively learning. This is exactly why I've made this platform. Because my students often say to me, great, yeah, I know all the grammar and I think I know vocabulary. But when I'm in that moment, it's not coming into my head. And I can't actively produce it. That's what this platform is for. So I've made this for you. It's basically got all of the grammar and vocabulary that you need for the C1 exam, and it's got tons of different ways of practicing it in an active way. So there's lots of different, you have to rewrite sentences, you have to use a sentence, there's multiple choice options, there's so many different ways for you to build your vocabulary and your grammar over time. And my students are using it at the moment. They're testing it for me at the moment. And one of them said, oh my God, it made me realize how many gaps I have in my grammar and how much vocabulary I don't actually know. So she's loving it at the moment. So like I said, being tested at the moment. If you're watching this video of it later, click up there and hopefully it will be out already as I'm speaking to you. Click up there, that will take you to the platform and you can use it. If it's not out, click up there anyway, and that will take you to a waiting list. You can put your name down on the waiting list to use this. And as soon as it's ready, I'll send you an email and you can check it out. The link's in the description as well if you want it there. And that should help you to build your grammar and vocab, regardless of whether you're learning for the Cambridge C1 exam or not. Have a look at it, and that should help you to kind of slowly build everything. Meanwhile, we're going to head on. Next question. Phrasal verbs are not as important as teachers make them seem. Totally disagree. Totally disagree. I know that you hate phrasal verbs. A lot of students really hate them. I get why. They're very difficult to learn. They're even more difficult to use. Again, go to the platform and it'll make it easier for you. But they are really important because when you listen to native speakers, I've used that word again, but when you listen to people speak English, we use them all the time for everything. We could use like 3 or 4 in one sentence, and if you don't know those words, you're not going to understand the sentence. And it's just something that people do so naturally, and it's something so unconscious that you just... Yeah, it's really hard to pick them up naturally, and it's very hard to use them, but they are a very big feature of English. And all English, American, British, South African, Australian, whatever. It's a major feature of English, so you do need to learn them. The quicker you learn them, and the quicker you learn to also use them in speaking, the faster you will sound more natural. And yeah, the more natural your speech will seem if you use them. So definitely focus on them and use them when you can, and you will sound much more natural when you speak English. All right, next one. Adults can learn English just as well as children. I agree with this. A lot of, I get this as an excuse a lot from students saying, oh, you know, I have quite a few kind of older students, maybe in their 60s, and they say, oh, you know, my brain doesn't work how it used to be, and oh, I'm just a bit slower and it takes a while. And I'm thinking, nah. If you're retired, you're not working, you've got all the time in the world to learn languages. So you can't use that as an excuse. I get it. Obviously, biologically, scientifically, yes, your brain does slow down. Yes, your memory might get worse. However, you've got more time on your hands. And you've got more vocabulary from your native language that you can translate into English, and you have, you know, more ways to express yourself than a child would have. The reason it's easier for children, yes, their brains are like sponges. Before the age of 8, linguistically, they had the best chance of becoming bilingual, trilingual. Throw as many languages at them as you can. Yes, but they can't express themselves as well regardless, because they don't have the brain development and the maturity to do so. So I would say adults, yes, you can. Okay, you have got less time, but you can if you put the effort in. If I take my father-in-law as an example, he may be watching. Hello, if you are. He's my biggest fan on YouTube. If I take him as an example, he's fluent in, I don't know how many languages, maybe 7 or 8. He's just finished teaching himself Mandarin. You know, it's just what he does in his spare time. And it's like, that's the perfect example of how adults are perfectly capable of being fluent in languages and learning languages as adults themselves. Take myself as an example. When I was learning Italian anyway, first language I properly learned was Italian at the age of 20. It took me a good 4 to 5 years to learn it properly, fluently, but yeah, I would say I was just as good as a child. So yeah, yes, you can. Stop using it as an excuse. You can. Just put your head down and study. Take the time, make the time, be consistent. I think the main thing is, as long as you're consistent, then yes, you can definitely learn English as well as a child can, for sure. And don't be afraid. That's the edge that children have over adults. They're not afraid. They just talk and talk and talk. They don't have fear. Adults are too afraid to be embarrassed or to look stupid or something when they make a mistake. That's the main thing that holds you back, I think, from learning a language. So yeah, don't be afraid. Just do it. Okay, next one. Motivation matters more than talent in language learning. I would agree. Again, strongly agree with this. I don't know whether there is such a talent as learning languages, to be honest. I think it's just a matter of consistency, like I said before. I think it's a bit annoying when people are like, oh yeah, but you're just good at languages. And it's like, no, I just work hard at it. It kind of invalidates all of the effort that you put into learning a language, I think. But motivation makes you consistent. And if you're consistent, you're more likely to be fluent in that language rather than talented. Again, take myself as an example, thinking about Japanese. I lost motivation with my Japanese and I haven't studied it for, over a year now. I've just not even picked up a book, not bothered. Which is bad because I've lost everything that I learned, but it got really tricky with all the writing and the reading, and I just thought, I can't be bothered. My motivation went, my consistency slipped, and that was it. So yes, motivation matters more than talent, because talent is, I'd say there's very few people with a talent for actually learning languages, but anyone can have motivation, which means anyone can have consistency and anyone can have fluency. So. All right, next one. This is turning into a long episode. I feel like I've been talking for ages. Okay, you can reach Let me know in the comments as well what you think. Every one of those questions, let me know. I want to discuss with you in the comments what you think. You can reach an advanced level without ever studying with a teacher. I am going to drive my business into the ground if I continue to answer these questions. But I would say yes, you can. Again, I think it all depends on consistency. Actually, it also depends on how different the language you're learning is away from your native language. Again, for me, for example, I studied Spanish without a teacher. I never had a teacher for Spanish. I already knew Italian, so I studied Spanish through Italian. I think I had one teacher just for conversation. They didn't really teach me anything. It was just a conversation. I just spoke to them. But I didn't have a teacher actually say, this is how grammar works. I just taught myself. But when it came to Japanese, completely different. I needed a teacher for that because the way your brain has to function in order to make a sentence, you need to think completely differently about grammar, and it's just not intuitive at all. So I needed a teacher. There was no way, even at a beginner level. There was no chance. So yeah, depends on the language. And again, depends on how consistent you are and how much motivation you have. I like having language, when I'm studying languages, I do like having regular lessons because it keeps me on track. Because if someone says, this is what I want you to do, this is your homework, study this, do that, I'll see you next week. I've got the pressure, there's pressure on me to do it, to not let that person down when I see them the next week. So it kind of forces me to stay consistent and motivated. So yeah, depends on the type of person you are. If you have a lot of self-discipline, no, I would say you don't need a teacher. If you're not that self-disciplined, then I would get a teacher because that'll keep you on track. If you do want a teacher, I'm available. I'll put my link up there. Take a look there. You can have a look at any individual or group lessons. If you'd like to take a lesson with me, I would be happy to help you if you need a teacher. Moving on. Memorizing chunks and expressions is better than learning single words. I would agree. Yeah, I would agree, especially when it comes to phrasal verbs, especially when it comes to idioms, especially when it comes to collocations. All advanced level stuff, definitely start learning chunks. When you're first beginning, yeah, okay, you're learning like apple, red, house, whatever. Yeah. But at advanced levels, definitely chunking is a lot more useful to you than learning a single word. So if you learn the word, I don't know, difference, for example, on its own, okay, that's a very low level word. It's better to know that certain words collocate with that word, like notable. There's a notable difference in whatever. If you learn that as a chunk, then you don't need to remember those two words. You just remember the one chunk. Same with phrasal verbs. You have to learn that as a chunk. So yeah, I would say it makes it a lot easier because you're just learning the one chunk rather than several words on their own. So it's kind of less, like fewer words to learn, technically. All right, next one. A strong accent is not a real problem if your English is clear. Agree. I basically said this before when we were talking about, I can't remember what the other statement was, but I said as long as you can communicate and the other person can understand you, your accent is not a problem. Forget about it. Put your energy into something else. You shouldn't be embarrassed if you have a foreign accent. It's just the way you speak. It's fine. Okay, and that's it. That's our agree, disagree. Let me know what you think in the comments about any of those. If you liked this lesson, if it helped you, please let me know in the comments and please give it a like and make sure that you're subscribed to the channel. Just helps it to get to more people so that they can learn a few things for their exams and just in general. If you've got any questions or anything, again, let me know in the comments. And if you'd like to take a lesson with me or any of my video courses, you can go to www.englishclassesonline.co.uk and you can take a lesson with me there. That's all from me for today, and I'll see you in another lesson soon. All right, bye.